Okay, we will, by my watch, it's 4:30, so we'll get this meeting started. This is the policy subcommittee. Can people hear me? We don't have an IT person today. They went home sick, so if there's anything that comes up, please let me know. So both Deb and I are here. We're on the committee. We invited Zach Freeman, the principal of the Hermon Middle School, and we will start right off with public comment. First up today is Scott Jellison.
I want to thank you. Can you hear me?
No, it's a little bit low.
Well, I can't. I'll try to speak up. I want to thank everyone and the committee for letting me speak. I was given a presentation. I was asked to present this on behalf of a parent that wants to remain anonymous. Dear Policy Committee, when considering what, if any, amendments you will make to IJJ, I ask you consider situations like our families. A family with 3 kids forever changed by sexual trauma. Our kids are not alone. Studies show that up to 43% of kids go through at least one trauma, and more than 1 in 4 adolescents have been sexually assaulted. That means in a classroom of 25 seniors, 6 to 8 kids have been sexually assaulted. In a high school of 400 adolescents, about 100 adolescents have been sexually abused. Transgender students have a 5% higher rate of getting raped than other students. Bisexual men and women are more than twice as likely to be victims of rape than straight. Events that involve people hurting other people, such as rape and assault, are more likely to result in PTSD than other types of traumas. Sexual assault often leads to severe depression. As parents raising kids affected by sexual trauma, I am begging you to consider focusing on a curriculum that does not include sexual content and adding language regarding age-appropriate sexual content to the IJJ policy so that the Hermon schools are a safe place free of sexual trauma triggers. Although some kids who experience sexual assault can read a book about sex or sexual assault and be inspired to report the assault and get help, many others will be triggered and relive the experience of their sexual assault. PTSD triggers can be anything that causes a person with post-traumatic stress disorder to experience a flare-up of symptoms. The types of triggers that provoke such a reaction can vary widely from person to person. However, they commonly include such things as seeing images that remind you of your traumatic experience, hearing words or phrases that act as trauma reminders. Why do these triggers cause symptoms to flare up? Researchers believe that the memory of the traumatic experience is stored in a different way than other types of memories. When a kid is exposed to a trigger, it can cause the brain to misfire, so to speak. As a result, a kid may involuntarily relive the source of their trauma or experience other symptoms of PTSD, potentially leading to insomnia, nightmares, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, rebellion, disengagement, fear of trusting, avoiding the triggers by skipping the assignment, skipping class, or even dropping out of school, and self-harm. Some turn to alcohol, drugs, and/or suicide for relief. To help our kids through their trauma, we have had more hours of therapy than you could possibly imagine. We have learned that safely and effectively working with kids impacted by trauma is a specialty, and not all therapists have the advanced training in best practice. Quality, safe, and effective care of a sexually abused adolescent requires a safety plan, a support system, and special techniques such as EMDR, ART, brain spotting, play therapy, and/or somatic sensory, to name a few. It can also require medication. For a small group, it requires a safe environment such as a residential treatment facility where someone can be with them 24/7 to keep them safe when preparing for and during the process. It always requires the people being ready to do the work. Safely and effectively treating kids affected by trauma requires more than the public school is designed to provide and parents or teachers are trained for. Since an adolescent who was sexually abused as a young child may block out the sexual trauma, yet oftentimes their body still remembers, triggers in such a situation become confusing, often leading them to believe something is wrong with them. Although my husband and I never forgot the sexual trauma of our daughter, she suppressed the trauma until adolescence. If she was asked if she wanted to opt out, she likely would not have known how triggering such a book could be. If we were asked to opt in to books containing sexual content, we would have said no, because we knew what our daughter had been through. Other adolescents are mortified at the thought of asking to be exempt from a book because of sexual content. They might believe the teacher will ask why. Although it is important to talk with a trusted adult, this teacher may not be that child's trusted adult. Others want to just read it because everyone else is, and they want so desperately to fit in and be normal. The repeated triggering can lead to sadness and depression. Uncovering the wounds of sexual assault through exposure to sexual content can shake a person to their core. Uncovering those wounds with an adolescent without a safety plan, a competently trained professional, and parent knowledge can have disastrous results. I understand people have good intentions, thinking hopefully this book will inspire kids to reach out and get help. In actuality, it has the potential to trigger a child who has been sexually abused. Per the CDC, one of the ways communities can help support families with minors who have been sexually assaulted is to adopt policies that provide safe and healthy conditions for all children and families. I am asking you to do just that by focusing on a curriculum that does not include sexual content, create a clear definition of age-appropriate sexual content, and create a parent-guardian opt-in for materials containing sexual content. And it's signed respectfully, the mom. I want to thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next is Haley Kieser. Please see if that mic's on for Ryan.
Oh, there we go. How's that? Is that better? Just to speak to that real quick, I do want to mention before I say what I wrote is that the opt-out is confusing for some parents, and I know that
Yes, Mr. Jellison, we did hear you clearly from here.
oh,
Thank you. I didn't want you to think we didn't. Okay.
So the opt-out option that the school does have has been inconsistent. So if sometimes it's too late by the time someone knows or the content that may be offered in the curriculum for a parent to opt out, because we don't know, we know the syllabus, but we don't know the content. So parents don't always know to opt out. And then I have had other people who have mentioned that they asked to opt out and the teacher told them no. So that's something just to under your hat to consider or to look into for designing a policy. Okay. Thank you for allowing the public to speak today. I hope this is the standard going forward. As you know, I worked with an experienced law firm who specializes in policy and legislation. I put forward 2 policies that contain a clear outline and define appropriate content for minor children. I want to note that this also is in line with Maine sexual content law. Our policy should align with the law. I provided these policies several months ago, which has allowed plenty of time for you to review them and give fair consideration for adoption here in Hermon. I put these forward for you I put these forward for children, parents, and teachers as a solution to the content confusion. Having measurable expectations decreases confusion and the subjective debate over content, which will improve trust and morale for all. I have personally sat through countless training sessions regarding books, rights, and book debates. I know firsthand what's going on. I also know that we have the power to decide what our policy will be here in Hermon. We have the power to make it unique to our school. I ask that you be inclusive and consider these new options that I have brought to you. This will bring a solution to the exhausting content debate. Hermon, you have been given a chance to set yourself apart and bravely adopt a policy that is unique to our community. Please lead by example for our town, for others watching, that collectively, working together, we can find common ground for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Regina Leonard.
Hi there. I just have a couple of points, and if I'm coughing, please don't be worried. I'm asthmatic, so that's why I'm going to keep this brief today. One of my points is that while I think we've come quite far with communication and some transparency with meeting times and such, I'm still finding it difficult to find out information when it comes to these meetings, because I find that they change last minute, and while I can understand things happen, they're never in one location. So if I go to the website and I go under school committee and subcommittee, it's not there, but yet maybe it's in the live feed. And I know now we have a Facebook page, so I'm just asking for more clear and up-to-date communication for that. I think that, it's been stated that people weren't coming to these before, and I truly believe that that's because people didn't know that you could, like myself. I've lived here for 17 years. I never knew about any of this. By coming to regular meetings, I'm becoming more involved and aware, but I think more people want to be involved and want to be heard, and I think it's the job of the board to make sure that they are aware of that so that they can be there. My other point is to kind of go off of what Haley said. I know that, she brought it up in the regular meetings that we've had with this policy that she's found. I've reviewed that policy. I think that it should be strongly considered. I emailed it to you, Kristen, and to Micah Grant. I've asked you to review it. I think that the division in this town comes from the fact that we don't feel heard, and we're asking you to strongly consider this. Like she said, it's our turn to make a standard, and we can make our own policy and create something that people can get behind. And one of the things of the book appeal was that there is not a standard for these books, and that needs to be in place, and it needs to be included in this. And so I'm also going to ask you that in the subcommittee meetings that I've been to, and I mean this kindly, that you need to question more Mr. Grant, that you guys are on the board, and I'm just seeing you as kind of go along with him, and we're all sitting here wondering why more questions aren't being asked. I believe these policies are extremely important, probably one of the most important things that we do. So I'm just asking you to finally do the right thing, to listen to the people that voted you in. And I know that I get up and speak a lot, but it's because people are scared to. We have someone that's becoming anonymous because they're scared to get up and speak, and I'm not. So I can firmly say that I speak on the behalf of many parents, and I'm just asking for strong consideration and starting today. It doesn't need to be rushed through. If it takes multiple meetings to get it right, then let's get it right. And this could really start to unite and build a bridge in this town. So I'm asking you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Panziana?
Am I batting cleanup?
I'm sorry.
Am I batting cleanup? Am I the last guy? Hey, most of my thunder's already been stolen, so I'll take my time to make some points, I guess. I'm probably one of the luckiest guys in town. I get to see my boys off to school every day. It's something that I've worked for all my life, to be able to be in that position. What does that have to do with what we're talking about today? My wife and I give my boys a message every day when they leave. Try hard, treat others as you'd want to be treated, and do the right thing. It's a concept that a 9-year-old can completely understand, and they understand the theory of it. But it's a practice that even adults struggle to do every day. And I bring this up because I think it was September when we talked about milk and honey. Kristen, the two of us agreed on the concept of having standards for content. And I'm not proud of it, but when the committee first reading came back to full school committee, when the policy came to full school committee, it didn't include any of that. And we unfortunately had a non-productive interaction. And it's not something I'm proud of, but it's something I want to work through. The two of us grew up in the same town together. We've been to the same high school. We have some of the same friends. Our families know each other. And tonight I ask a simple favor that is really hard to do in practice. And I ask you tonight to try hard, treat us as you'd want to be treated, and to just simply do the right thing. Thanks.
Thank you. That ends our public comment section for tonight, and now we will be looking at IJJ, which is on the front table, copies if anyone needs a copy of that. So looking at this, just some of the things that are currently in red were just some verbiage regarding changing board to committee, which was, I think, overlooked in April of 2019. There was also a paragraph that was repetitive, so that was taken out. That's not taking that information out, it's just, it was duplicative. We also changed school unit to school district. And something that we made as a change was under procedures for selection. We did change already from social, since it's the third paragraph of procedures for selection on page 3. Social studies and science, we actually had a discussion with, Brian Walsh was here that day, and we had a discussion about changing that to be all textbooks, not just those 2 specific subject areas. And also, it was noted not to be older than 5 years, but we thought we should be reviewed after 5 years and replaced as needed, because I think there was one of the meetings that we had that we were actually getting requests to buy materials that were old. So that was just an update. And looking at the rest of that real quickly. So I just thought I would go over the things that were already amended that we had brought to the board, and then we returned the board that day, or the committee, I should say, that day, we brought it back to the subcommittee. So we'll start from the beginning. We'll look at all of the sections and have a discussion.
All right, so we have obviously policy IJJ. At the beginning, we have our instructional and library material selection. We obviously recognize that it's the board, or the committee, that retains and to approve the selection of the instructional materials, and authorizes the superintendent to go about establishing the system and selection for instructional materials, including the procedures of an orderly process. Superintendent's responsible for overseeing the purchase of instructional materials within the budget parameters set forth by the committee, and he expects the superintendent to report on the progress made. And then each school, going into the last paragraph, each school maintains a library reading program, which we do. That includes books and other print materials, multimedia materials, online internet resources that support the curriculum, including books that are read for enjoyment, certified library reading specialists, which we have K-12, I should say pre-K-12, and we have 2 who are responsible for overseeing the library media program under the supervision of the superintendent. As with instructional materials, the board delegates, or the committee, I should say committee, delegates responsibility for the selection of library materials, technology, and other internet resources to the school system. And I think one of the things that really came out in the meeting, at least when we met with some of the teacher group and the library media specialists, was just that part about that professionalism and that ability to select materials that's age appropriate. I felt like that was something that was really stressed when talking with teachers about this policy, and one of the reasons specifically our library media specialists like this policy is that they're the ones that are trained to make these selections, whether it's books, multimedia, etc. And that's some wording that honestly I feel like they believe they're empowered to make a decision for our students and for our programs. Any comments on that? No? Okay. So we obviously have a duplicate paragraph, like Kristen said, that we need to get rid of, and then we have the definitions. So one of the things in respect to the objectives of selection is the committee recognizes that it's the primary objective of the instruction materials to implement and support the curriculum of library media resources to extend and enrich educational opportunities. And so for us, this is a really important statement that in reviewing some of the policies that were submitted, we don't feel like that policy has the objectives for selection as it relates to the main learning results, and we feel like that's really well written. I'll just highlight again that these policies written by Maine School Management do follow Maine statute. So I think that one of the things that, and again, talking with Maine School Management and also speaking with our teachers, that this is a policy that they feel does enrich the opportunities and expand upon the student interest in the library media centers. And they provide, obviously, a really wide range of materials with diversity and presentation of different point of views. And so we feel like that's a really well stated what our goal is as a committee, or what the goal of the committee should be. And what we try to do is provide diversity and appeal to a wide range of views. So I would just open that up to any comments and objectives of selection.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, because hearing from public comment and the perspective of those that are sitting here, and in reflection of the meeting that we had with the teachers to hear their side as well, is that, for instance, like I'm looking at the synopsis of that particular policy that both Haley and Regina had shared with me. This is like Danielle's Haggerty's highlights. So when I look at those highlights, one of the things, let's just take elementary school for an example. So no material in elementary school library shall contain visually or visually implied depictions of sexual acts, simulations, or such acts, which I think we confirmed that we didn't have that in elementary school when we were able to look at at least the library list. But also one of the specifics that kind of was an aha moment for me to think about was the third bullet that Danielle shared, which was visual depictions of nudity or implied nudity. So that would also apply to books like No David. I don't know if anybody has children that love those books, No David, but No David has no clothes on. Or if you have a child in a bathtub and they don't have a shirt on from the waist up and they're in the bathtub, those would be, when we're looking at those specifics, those would then take those books out of it. So I think that I share as a parent and an educator that there, of course, are books that are not age appropriate, and that each one of our buildings, we need to have an understanding of the age level developmentally, where they're at, and then looking at those instructional and reading materials across the curriculum, not just talking about books, but across the curriculum. So I just wanted to give that as an example because as Brian stated today, yes, I do take into consideration what everyone is saying, but I also need to hear the educator's side of it as well, and that's what I wanted to share about that.
So, and I would just say that age appropriateness, I think, is something that our library media specialists are constantly weighing when they're selecting books K-12, and there is going to be disagreement. That's one of the things we talked about with the teacher group and what's considered age appropriate. But obviously, one of the things that I confirm when I'm reviewing a suggestion is, do we have sexual acts, books with sexual acts in our K-4 library or in our K-8 library, sorry, pre-K. And I've been informed that no, that's not true. We don't have those types of things. But then when I look at language that says implied depictions, well, I think that's where I really struggle with some of the terminology is, well, what's an implied sexual act or what's an implied nudity? If it's Ernie in the tub, Rubby Dub, was it Rubby Dub or whatever, was that Ernie or Bird? I don't know, one of them, you know, or I'm reading that book with, you don't want to be an optimist, what's that book? I'm terrible with book names. But when there's a little boy in a tub taking a bath and it's talking about bath time, is that implied nudity? Could that be challenged? I struggle with those types of things. Who makes those determinations when you start getting into terminology like implied, or is sexual act a kiss, or is it sex itself, or is it rape? Is it two people who went to bed together? I think that's where a lot of times, to me, it's more about the professional discretion of the content and the age appropriateness versus like this hard and fast implied definition. And that's one of the things that came out of that conversation with the teachers.
The biggest part of that was allowing professional discretion and ensuring that when an individual reviews books that we're going to be looking at in light of what's best for the students in that classroom. And then the other part, big part of the conversation, which we'll get to later, is making sure that parents know they have a right to opt out, and making sure that's very clear, and making sure that the procedures are steadfast across the district. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talked about as a teacher group was, not we as a teacher group, when I talked to the teacher group, it was, do you ever deny parents the right to opt their student out? And I know from that meeting, at least that representation said, no, that's not what happens if a parent makes a request or a guardian makes a request to be opted out of a particular type, that we do not deny that. I know in my experience as a principal, we didn't deny that. We might say, well, we might not take that book off the shelf, or we might not, right? But if you can find an alternative assignment, then we'll find an alternative assignment for your child. So that's something that we want to make sure that we're making sure that is a consistent message that parental authority to opt out is, that line of parents are uncomfortable with whatever that content is, and that needs to be honored and find an alternative assignment.
Yeah, and I heard that loud and clear too, like even if it's a subject area or a thematic series like Harry Potter, if a parent didn't want their child to be reading Harry Potter, then there needed to be other options.
Right. Good. Criteria for I didn't want to cut it off. Any other comments regarding objectives of selection? And we kind of tangent off that a little bit. Support achievement of the content standard and learning results. So obviously one of our primary motivators in selecting multimedia or library media is the learning results. Supports the goals and objectives of the school's educational system and program. Enrich and support the curriculum, and I hear that in public comment obviously as well, and that's one of my primary goals is having a visual curriculum, a stated curriculum going into next school year that is easily accessible, and that's something that we have, as you know, we have been working on, because I think it is important that seeing the curriculum and then being able to ask the teacher, okay, I see the curriculum for this class. So what does that actually mean? Like I see you're going to talk about some type of issue, or you're going to talk about biology, or you're going to talk about, and so what book does that mean, and what book is my student going to be expected to read? Because I think we have to have that kind of dialogue, but parents, if they don't know, right, there's no stated curriculum, they can't have an educated conversation, and they're not aware. So that's obviously one of the primary goals that we have as a school department this year is getting a stated curriculum for next year.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I mean, many people have heard someone quote me in an email that stated that there was specific instructional material that at the high school level that my son was reviewing, and yes, there might have been something there that I didn't agree with, but it doesn't mean I need that book to be taken off of the shelf. It means that as a parent, I have a discussion with my son about the parts of that I didn't agree with from our family perspective, but it doesn't mean that other people don't have that perspective. I'm constantly working with people in my profession that have different perspectives than I do, but it doesn't mean that it's not up for discussion.
And it's a valid perspective. So, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you that it's a valid perspective. Oops, I did turn it on.
Oh, it is.
That, you know, we listen to their perspectives because they are valid.
As you continue on page 3 with the instructional and library material selection, you have taken into consideration varied interests, foster respect for cultural diversity and varied opinions. That was something that teachers, again, highlighted, was just that part of having varied opinions represented. Give a comprehensive, accurate, and balanced representation to minorities, women in history, science, leadership, the arts, contributions of ethnic, religious, and cultural groups to our American heritage. Present a balance of opposing sides of controversial issues to enable students to develop a capability for critical analysis. Stimulate growth of factual knowledge, literary appreciation, aesthetic values, and ethical standards. Provide a background of information that will enable students to make intelligent decisions in their daily lives. And I kind of chuckle that this is listed last, but respect the constraints to the school unit's district budget. And that's obviously something that we're very aware of when we're buying our books and whatnot, is just that there are limited, amounts of periodicals and books, and you are trying to get a very wide range of books represented in your library, and maybe textbooks are expensive. I think that's probably why that review was not for all textbooks. So budgets are a pretty significant cost. Books are a pretty significant cost in a school district's budget when you take into account, that K-12 budget. Factors that should be considered are accuracy, currency material, importance of subject matter, scholarship, quality of writing and production, and reputation and significance of the author, artist, or composer. I think we certainly have moved away from the significance of the author. I don't know if that necessarily applies anymore when we start talking about the reputation and significance of the author. I think that's kind of lost some of its, just because so-and-so wrote it doesn't mean we would necessarily go out and buy it. I don't know if that has to be struck, certainly, but it doesn't play as large a factor anymore. But there are some authors that, just because they wrote it, there's a tendency for teachers to, for whatever reason, kids, whether it's, I'm trying to think of somebody famous now that kids read.
I was thinking J.K. Rowling, actually. She wrote Harry Potter,
Right.
which we want on our shelves, but then she wrote a book later called The Vacancy, which is probably not a book for some of our younger students.
Yeah. So
So I guess we could just say reputation of the author versus significance, or not even, or just quality of writing and production.
I think it's
of
more
the
about
author.
I think it's more about the quality of production than it is about the reputation and significance, because, by that standard, anybody who wrote a great or bestseller, I mean, how many times did you get tired of writing, reading Steinbeck? Just because Steinbeck wrote it doesn't mean it was a good book. So just because Shakespeare wrote it, no, I'm just kidding, he's pretty famous, but
Doesn't mean you liked it.
it doesn't mean we liked it, that's for sure. So I think that there is something to be said for just the quality and the production of writing. It doesn't necessarily have to be based upon the the reputation and significance of the author.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think quality of writing and production is enough.
Yeah.
I think that qualifies it enough.
Any other thoughts on that? Is it okay to just strike or just to end that quality of writing and production?
Yeah, it'll be our proposal.
Okay.
I agree.
In evaluating software, multimedia materials, and online internet resources, Additional factors that should be considered include purpose for use, content format, appropriate use of graphics, sound, animation, feedback provided, ease of use. So for us, we have the main online category system. So for us, really, it's just about, we have a shared catalog database with the University of Maine. That's the primary online tool that we use for, our multimedia, just that inter-network of library sharing.
So is that statement about that particular software then, like when I'm reading that, I would assume that. So in evaluating software, like what kind of software, what are we, how can we be more specific?
We really don't have, and Mr. Freeman, unless you can think of something, there really isn't a software suite that we use anymore that has,
The way I read that is, having come from a high school setting, we had a lot of databases for our students to be able to have access to, research bases. There's a lot of online magazines that now exist that we had access for our students. So just evaluating the different qualities that go around those databases that exist. That's how I read it.
yeah, it's
So maybe more databases than software?
Yeah, because
It's kind of old.
software is old wording. It's really more the online databases and subscriptions that you might have. But from a software standpoint, we don't purchase a lot of software anymore. I was even thinking as old as like maybe when they bought Britannicas online, and just some of that really antiquated. Like you download an entire book or an entire suite, but that's really not common practice anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
I don't know of any software necessarily that this would apply to. Databases, absolutely.
right. That's why I do think that in evaluating databases, multimedia materials, I think that should be the wording there. Factors that should be considered include purpose for use, content format, degree of interactivity, or student involvement. Because that's the other thing too. We do have some of those online resources through whether it's a card catalog at the University of Maine or subscriptions through Husson, and some of them can be pricey. And so weighing whether or not we should continue on those subscriptions versus the use, I think should be considered. Just because we always spent that money doesn't mean we always should.
I would recommend adding a line in there around just looking at or evaluating how many people actually go to these databases, because the reality is that we buy a $5,000 database that's a year license and then we have 2 people use it, versus we buy a $4,000 database and 85 people use it. It may be worth evaluating on a year-to-year basis the need of said product.
So maybe that would go under the next section, actually procedure for selection versus. Because I'm thinking, looking at that last paragraph there, it's more like when selecting online databases, multimedia materials versus, or when selecting or accessing or permitting access, or I don't know, it's too general and antiquated right now, so I'm just trying to figure out how to reformat that. And I know we have to tell Jody, so we gotta make sure we
Yeah. Well, so obviously I think we should say in evaluating databases, multimedia collection materials, online resources, right? I think we should change that, get rid of the word software. I feel like those are still appropriate things to look at. Content format, degree of interactivity, student involvement, appropriate use of graphics. I don't know about the sound animation. I can't speak to the elementary side of things, so I can certainly ask Melissa if those things are appropriate. I feel like they would be. Feedback provided and easy. I feel like those are all good criteria. I think, like you said, looking at the cost probably is more appropriate for procedures for selection than it is under criteria for selection.
Well, I was also curious why the A, B, C, D, like the lettering bulleting was ended in then 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, we're looking at the section is criteria for selection.
So
I think that one with criteria for selection of accuracy, currency, that's important. In that paragraph above, I think that, but should it be just bulleted like the rest would? I'm sure it came from like a sample policy and was just adopted, would be my guess.
Would those two paragraphs fit under procedures for selection? Because the other ones, the lettered ones, are more bullet points, but procedures for selection, these two paragraphs.
Yeah, I'm
Just
thinking
want to
though,
tap into that as part of the selection process.
in the paragraph after J though, if we're thinking about criteria for selection, considering accuracy, currency, those are all criteria for selection.
Yep.
Importance of subject matter,
Right.
but then that next paragraph
In evaluating.
would be more of a procedure, I think, versus.
Yeah. So I think you could you look at doing a JK, doing a K and saying, you wouldn't even have to say other, you obviously could just transition to district budget, K, accuracy, currency, and material, and frankly, you could even do an L and say importance of subject matter, scholarship, quality of writing and production.
Yep, I agree.
Right, so you could do a K, L, and then you could just move. We struck the reputation and significance of author, artist, or composer, and then you could move in evaluating software.
Or evaluating online databases.
Sorry, thank you. Evaluating online databases, you can move that under procedures for selection. What do you think, Zach? You think that's
That makes sense to me, because that's more of a procedure, you're right.
the factors you should consider are? Okay, so we would just say K and then L and then move under procedures for selection. And it could say, right, we could go from meeting the needs of individual schools based on the knowledge and curriculum of the existing collections, basic learning materials, those that are the predominant instructional materials used by most members of the class, are used for a significant portion of the course or receive major emphasis during the course, or are essential to student achievement and the content center of the learning results. So you could have that paragraph. You could then say, in evaluating online databases, and you could then insert that paragraph.
Could we also say when evaluating, or do we have to say in? And I was also curious to piggyback on that. Is it evaluating, like is evaluating the word, or reviewing or assessing, and is that the curriculum coordinator's job?
So when we're reviewing databases, a lot of it is going to fall on the curriculum coordinator because there now are many online subscriptions that we look at for, like whether it's IXL for math, or even a lot of times it's the building principals, right? They might be reviewing, maybe there's a component of Letterland that's online, as, you know, like a subscription that we subscribe to, you know, at the elementary school, and the new program that was approved for this fall was that August that it got approved, or
Yeah,
July? Yeah. So it really could fall to a variety of different people at the different, depending on the building. I feel like, given the policy, we probably are talking a little more librarians, but I think it could apply to both.
Yeah, in that scenario, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good example. So when evaluating online databases or multimedia materials,
Yeah.
which would match up with curriculum,
Yes.
obviously.
Yes.
Right, okay. So are you thinking we would put that as the second paragraph of procedures and selections, or the first?
I think we put it second,
Yeah,
put meeting the needs first, put that
Yeah.
second.
that's what
And
I'm saying.
then before recommending materials for purchase, professional staff should evaluate the existing. I think that flows nicely But like you said, it should say when, not in,
Right.
when evaluating. Because it needs to occur.
Right.
That review, that evaluation has to occur.
So do we add in there, like he mentioned, the amount of use? I mean, does that need to be a policy? It was mentioned checking how many folks are using that subscription, whether or not it's one that you want to maintain. I mean, that's a question. It doesn't necessarily need to be part of the policy. It could be a procedure of it, but I don't know if it needs to. But you know, you want to get the most out of the subscriptions that are being purchased, the most use out of
I
it.
feel like the next paragraph that says before recommending, that kind of encompasses what Zach said.
Okay.
Do you, Zach?
Yes, it does.
Thanks.
So you don't have any statements regarding amount of use. You just have obviously reputable, unbiased, professionally prepared. But you don't necessarily have a statement on number of subscribers or, and I think that maybe the danger of putting wording like that is that, or maybe there's a strictly numbers view of it, and you say, X amount only use this, we're getting rid of it.
Right.
But that could be really valuable to that.
Subject that you're doing.
Right, what if it's a special ed population and the numbers are lower,
Right.
but they still benefit from that particular?
Right.
And I can see it
I agree.
turning into a numbers game where a program, an online program, costs a certain amount of money, then but you don't see the value, you don't see that tangible value, you just see the spreadsheet value of number of students times cost. Wow, that's expensive per student versus this is really valuable to these students and help them advance grade levels.
Well, and I think the research piece comes into that too, and professional judgment, as we talked about earlier. So
Exactly.
as a special educator, there's always new research on what's great for kids like in Title I and for reading strategies and different curriculums that come about for smaller groups benefiting from
Right,
instructional.
and it
materials.
does fall back to the professional trained staff, knowing which ones, even portions of the class are gonna benefit from, so.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
So we won't put anything in regarding, despite what I said earlier about number of students omitting something to the effect of having like ease of use in there.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
What, Haley?
I'm going to make a point of order.
You can't do that in the middle of the meeting.
I can't because this board, she is not a voting member of our school board. She is a representative. So this isn't even in compliance and I have some things I want to comment on. I would like to be recognized to speak.
No.
Micah, you don't get to decide.
That's not your fault. Come on, guys. We're all trying to get to the same place, right? Let's all work
Haley,
together.
what do you want to share?
First, I want to point out that the library site, the catalog, is very hard to find. Before the book challenge, it was right on the website. It is no longer, it's like embedded into the website. You can barely find the catalog to search for books.
I don't think that's obviously an IT thing that needs to happen
Yes.
from the web point of view.
In your own words, Kristen, during the school board meeting, you said that you wanted to define,
This is completely appropriate.
you are not the chair, Micah.
There is no chair. This is completely inappropriate.
This is a
And you're
discussion.
trying- We know it's not a discussion.
Yes,
We're
it
trying
is.
to review this policy.
This policy, you said in your office to me that you liked the policy that I brought forward and it had content in it that you felt should be adopted. Those were your words. Kristen, in the meeting you said you wanted to have something that defined content so we had something measurable. I am not saying that we need to have I'm saying I gave you a policy that defines sexual content. We cannot and do not have record of books that are in the classrooms available to kids. We only know what's in the library. That in of itself needs to change. I am asking that this is the second or third time this has come back to you. You are not making changes that define content for the staff, for the children. We do not need to provide sexually explicit materials to minors. That's what parents are asking for. Let's stop the debate and bring a real solution here. This, what you're talking about, you're not changing anything.
Okay, I hear your opinion, and I'm going to move forward with the meeting. This isn't the final product. We're bringing it to the board. This is, and we're not even finished. So.
You are avoiding what everybody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm not avoiding anything. I'm going section by section. This doesn't have anything in it about sexually explicit stuff.
I want you to clarify that.
Kristen, that's the point, is none of the policy has anything about sexually explicit stuff. So we're asking you to address that. There will be nothing in the written policy that we currently have that gets to the point of sexually explicit stuff. So we have asked this committee to address it.
And we are going to get to that point.
Okay.
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
It's not over.
All right, thank you.
But interrupting is not helpful.
It shouldn't be interrupting.
According to your guidelines,
So,
quality
one of the things that I think we should consider is, I think we should just move to parental authority, because I'm prepared to make my recommendation on conversations with main school management. And are you all set if we move to parental authority?
I want to review the next two paragraphs
Sure.
first.
Kristen, where are we?
Top of page 4.
Top 4, yeah, okay. Whenever possible, purchase of non-print materials, multimedia, internet, technology, or resources shall be made only after personal evaluation by the librarian, specialist, or other appropriate staff. Reviewing aids may be used in lieu of personal evaluation.
So I'm curious about that last statement. The reviewing aids may be used in lieu of what does that actually refer to? We're talking about personal meaning just the librarian?
I can answer that.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you get a list of 1,000 books that you're going to order for a library for a single year, the librarian does not have time to personally go through every one of those books. So there's online databases out there that say if you buy this cohort of books, they have this content, they have this grade levels, they have this information. So that way we're able to purchase more books for students using professional judgment of companies that we utilize to be able to do that.
Okay, so So I think, though, the statement of whenever possible probably isn't a great one to put there. So I don't know if we just want to say when purchasing non-print materials and multimedia or internet and technology resources that we need only after personal evaluation. Is there, as you mentioned, Zach, like in your experience in the other district you were at and also here, would there be someone with, I don't know, like do all the librarians do it together across the board? Like you said, they don't always have the time to go through, so is there a team or a pairing or?
I can't speak to the logistics. I can say that having worked directly with a librarian in my previous district, and it would be the same here, they go to their catalog and they select 100 books, and these 100 books have these genres that are linked to them that are high school, middle school, elementary school equivalents, and they look at the ratings based on other libraries, they look at the ratings based on users, but they don't necessarily go and read the books themselves, just because when you have a library of 10 10,000 books that we have here in Hermon. You just physically cannot do that for a single individual.
So when it states here, non-print materials, what's the definition of a non-print material?
Anything like that could be the database that we were referring to, that could be online subscriptions.
Okay. Any thoughts, Deb?
Can you just state the purchase of non-print, not take out whatever possible, and just make the statement that when, you know, the purchase of basically these materials will follow this procedure, just.
Or following the purchase of,
The purchase of non-print materials and multimedia, internet and technology resources should be made only after professional evaluation by the library, you know, by that team that reviews it. So taking out whenever possible.
right, I'm just thinking of the theme of the category is purchase of selection.
Correct.
Procedures for selection, so. So either like following the purchase of non-print materials.
Well, it should just
Or
say,
they might not have it till after.
well, it should say purchase of non-print material, right? Because they might purchase it and then ultimately get to the review piece and say, oh, no, we're not going to use this one, and ask for a refund, and, you know, or trade, send a subscription back. You know, it might not always be in that order.
I'm gonna read the next paragraph, because maybe you'll help me to figure it out. Multiple copies of outstanding and much in-demand materials should be purchased as needed, worn or missing. Okay, those are standard items. Replace periodically, update, no longer useful, should be withdrawn from collection, circulation. Well, I guess we could keep whenever possible. I don't know how else to make it flow. I mean, I'm assuming everything is reviewed.
I support taking that whenever possible out. I mean, the reality is the librarian is in charge of the librarian collection, so I think that they need to have some kind of eyes on it, even if it's through one of those reviewing aides.
So maybe all non-print materials and multimedia, internet, and technology shall be. We wanted to say, well, the reviewing piece is, I think, what this paragraph is about, and having those two options, but.
Right, I think if you just say purchase of non-print materials, internet, and technology shall be made only after.
Okay. Let's move on to donated materials. And I think that, is there an entire separate policy on donated materials that this is just noting, or?
This is just saying
Procedure,
that
like a procedure.
it's not uncommon to have somebody bring a book in and say, I'd like to
Right.
donate this to name a library or a building. And so this should, right, those, although they're not purchased, they should still, just because it's a gift, right, it should go
Right.
under review. Yeah.
All right, parental authority. And I have some thoughts about this as well.
start with your thoughts? Do you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead.
Did you say I'll go ahead or?
Yes, you.
Okay.
And then I'll
So-
follow up.
Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good. So I think that for me, when I look at, obviously, hearing some of the comments and reading the suggested alternative policies, I think that the best thing to do, and we stated it in the last subcommittee meeting, we didn't actually put it into policy, is we need to have an opt-out clause that explicitly states, here's a protocol, you want your child to read this book, you don't have to read this book. Or here's the content I don't want my child to be exposed to, and therefore the child's not exposed to that content. And it ought to be done at the beginning of the year. It ought to be in a form that goes home with the other beginning of the year forms. It obviously should be able to be amended at a point in the year. Obviously, if a parent says, you know, I do think my child is ready for, I just remember my dad didn't let me read Rifleman when I was in middle school. I don't know if anybody remembers that Gary Paulson book, but he said it was anti-gun. So I was allowed to read that book. But then I would like to think that in high school, I would be mature enough to read that book. And so to me, you know, if there's something that happens at the midway point in the year, or wherever a parent feels that they, you know, my child has matured, they can handle this title, or they're ready for this kind of content, then that form ought to obviously be changed. So that's what I think. I think it ought to come back on the parent. It's ultimately the parent's responsibility, and the parent should have a right to say. We believe that, again, this content, this title, it could be multiple titles, but I think that we ought to have a clause in there that speaks to the protocol that will be put in place at the 3 buildings for parents to be able to fill out and then be notified, you know, hey, your child tried to check this book out, we didn't let them, and so, you know, here's what you said, and we feel like it kind of obviously fits into that category of what you've asked them not to read, or obviously if it's a title specifically, they're not allowed to take that book out.
So in that particular section, in the second paragraph, where it says the committee recognizes that the final authority as to what materials an individual student will be exposed rests with the student's parents or guardian, I would like to consider the one that was highlighted from the one that was shared by Regina and Danielle and Haley about parent considerations, where it says, while librarians are trained in selecting materials in accordance with committee policy and may provide guidance to students in selecting text, the ultimate determination of appropriateness for a minor lies with the parent guardian. So I think it's written a little bit more specific. The last part of that says, please outline the procedure, but I would want to call that a protocol that should be followed by the parent or guardian. And then have I think that it's important for us to have that protocol in place for high school, middle school, and the elementary to be different based on the needs of those children, and the parents to have that ability building level, but also I was thinking about the high school and how, I don't know, maybe that would be twice a year because they have kind of like, the kids have different subject areas in the fall than they do in the spring, and some of their coursework is only half a year. But definitely at the beginning of the year, I mean, we could bring that to the committee to see, and Brian's not able to be here today, just get his thoughts on that, or the one time at the beginning of the year would, like you said, if a parent decided at one point that their child was at a certain age and they could read that material, but I guess if we did do it yearly, they probably wouldn't. They can always, as we mentioned and talked to with the teachers, that lots of parents talk to teachers directly is what we want them to do. So have the conversation about what are the things that you are not comfortable with as a parent. But I do like that statement. I'll just show it to you, Deb, in print if that's helpful. It's that last section.
on, I think that that follows along with that form for parents to know that that's the opportunity for them to opt out for their child. So I think that, yeah,
Well, I also like the way it states while librarians are trained in selecting, which is what we had mentioned in the selection
Yes.
section.
Yep.
So are you looking to,
Just that first, in that second paragraph, so the part that starts with the committee recognizes, just that first, replacing this. Actually, it's like 2 sentences, the first one's really long. With this one statement, those first 2 lines, I do think it's important to state that, and as a board, as a committee, and a policy, we don't want, just as everyone here, I feel that is here today to listen to this is kind of on one side, we don't have any representation of today of parents who feel the other way. Have I had some contact me? Yes. So it's important that we aren't making the decisions for both parents that have different views. And that's why in that statement it says that the wishes of one child's parent to restrict his or her or reading or viewing of a particular item infringe on the other parent's rights to permit their child to read or view the same material. So I think that that is a pretty strong statement that we are trying to see both sides.
so we go for the committee, and then we go recognizes librarians are trained in selecting materials, is that what you're saying? In accordance with policy, may provide guidance to students, but the ultimate determination of appropriateness for a minor lies with the parent or guardian. Is that what you're thinking, Kristen, as far as?
Right, which that next statement says, please, or the committee will outline the protocol, or we could say, or the building level principals, because we want their input on that. And we already have Brian's, but we don't have specific ones from middle school or elementary.
Yeah, like I did some research on this Bigger Bucks Central School District, and they just have a Google form that you fill out. So you just put the title, the book, content, hit submit, and it obviously goes to, I mean, I know what Mr. Walsh is going to say about what the return rate is going to be on those forms. And so I think even if you wanted to make it an online form, it might even be easier just because you're not going to have the go-between. And you're also not going to have students looking at potentially, like, oh, my parents don't want me to read this book, whatever it might be. And so that might be a way to, put a notification, this is where you go to find this form, and then you fill it out, hit submit, it goes to the appropriate building level library.
Not stuck in a folder.
Right, you can have like a notification in a folder, but
Right.
then you don't have, again, I know what I would have done probably around 6th grade, is I would have read what books my parents didn't want me to read, and then I would have gone and read them, or at least looked at the title just to see, just because 12-year-old kid. So I think you could like have a notification, like a tickler form. This is coming home, and here's the location of the form. It obviously will be on the website, and then parents can fill it out accordingly. And it would then, when you hit submit, it would go to, if they put middle school office, it's going to go to the office at that building and then be put on file with the particular team and library.
Well, yeah, I mean, I liked the way that Mr. Walsh explained it, but at that one meeting about, I think it was September, I can't remember, but anyway, it would be part of, if a student went into the library, went to scan something out that matched what their parents didn't want them to do, then they couldn't.
They can't,
They
right.
couldn't sign it out.
Right, it's not a notification that, it's not an alert, it's they can.
But they can pull it off the shelf and read it in the library. There's no rating system, this doesn't work.
And I understand that people want the opt-in, but I think currently that, what the system that we have in place, and if we're able to propose this, I'd like to try it and then get feedback.
Yep, I don't disagree. So we would look at adding in that with the, so obviously please outline procedures. So we would then say, a notification would be sent home at the beginning of the year. This form will be online, and parents can go in and submit the form based upon their standard, their value system.
Or preferences.
Preferences, right? Yeah.
And your suggestion for the opt-out option to be a protocol and per building, so that each one would have their own.
Procedure.
Use this policy, this paragraph.
Yeah, except I propose to not use the word procedure, but to use
Procedure.
protocol, because
Yep.
that's what we had discussed previously.
So we could say the following protocol will be, and we could just outline the protocol.
Well, we were going to have them be protocols, so they're not attached to the policy, but we want to reference them, so building level protocols.
Yep. I think you would, to make it, excuse me, efficient, you would say the building level protocols will be disseminated, and the parents, like you said, can fill those out at the appropriate levels.
Seems reasonable to me.
I mean, this sentence, the one we made sounds better, because please outline the procedure that should be followed, so that's what we're doing. So we're saying building level protocols will be established and shared with parents and guardians.
Yeah, and I would even say, I would define that maybe a little bit more after sharing with parents and guardians for opting out of certain content and titles or titles and content. Just so that it's just, they know what that protocol is, like for, titles and content. I think that's the easiest way to establish, again, your preferences as a parent.
We don't have a rating system, how are you gonna look at content?
Is so if you're ordering hundreds of books at a time and admitting that you don't really necessarily know what's in those books. And wouldn't it make sense to, I would assume that we're all here to err on the side of overprotecting kids than to damage a few? And just wonder, does it make sense to overprotect than to underprotect?
It seems like
That's
that's
the
hard
argument.
to take into consideration how many parents you actually have, parents or guardians, that actually don't care about their kids. And they don't care about if they have a warm bed, they don't care if they're homeless and stuff, they don't care if they have a meal to eat. Maybe you don't know that, maybe it's wrong for you to assume that you do. But you have a significant population of children in this town, in this district, who don't have that. They don't care what their kid eats. They don't care if their child is being sexually abused or having it. You render me speechless. You don't. It's so elitist of you to just assume that a parent is going to be proactive enough to jump through all those hoops to make sure their child doesn't check out a book. I mean, come on. Well, who protects those kids? I can tell you from from I know that there's so many kids that don't have anybody to oversee anything they're doing. They can stay home a whole 30 days consecutively without an adult in the house.
So as far as the challenged material section,
Standards.
So I think from the challenge materials, we have, you obviously have your protocol. I don't have any recommendations for changes to our procedures for school. Sorry. Challenge materials, I don't have any recommendations from challenge materials.
I don't either.
No. Okay. So what I'll do is, Mr. Shorty, would you like me to draft up that draft and then submit it to the four of you, or the three of you, to make sure I've captured the notes, especially in that last part? And then we'll put it in the agenda for school committee for December 12th.
Yes, Tuesday.
So there's no
Tuesday,
content
December
standard.
12th. I don't have my work calendar in front of me. Do you want to establish another meeting date?
I can look. I have a proposal. Hold
Yeah.
on.
I have a personal calendar. Might be able to.
Definitely in
Yes.
January. Time.
We can't all afford a private school where our kids can be protected. We elect you guys to sit up there and protect our children. This has nothing to do with taking away the professionalism of a teacher. It's clarifying the argument so that there isn't an argument.
I think that this 4:30 time worked well.
Yep.
It doesn't work well.
The parents that you're talking about are working at 4:30.
That's
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time. What did you say, 4:30?
Yeah, I wasn't looking at it. I was trying to think of Tuesday.
What's that? I still can't hear you. Tuesday? Okay.
In January.
Okay.
Unless because we don't really.
Oh, yeah.
Do we want to meet again before the January meeting, which is, that's the 9th,
Yes, the 9th. Yeah, we should. So we have a first reading of a policy to present. So we have to meet the 3rd.
Our first day back. Do you guys have a day off too?
I don't know.
In December?
January.
January, sorry. Can we do it?
I can do January 3rd.
4:30.
January 3rd?
Yep.
January 3rd at 4:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5:49. And it's 5:49.
So is that meeting adjourned?
Yes, our meeting is adjourned.
Hey, now we don't have any formalities. Obviously, there's some frustration on this side of the stage.
I'm tired of being sides.
But by any chance, could you guys just come down here and talk with us? All we want to do is to feel like our opinion is being addressed. And by being told that what we're saying during the meeting is inappropriate, it's very frustrating when we have such strong feelings about how inappropriate material is in the library and isn't addressed, but just by standing up and voicing it, we're considered by the superintendent to be doing something that's inappropriate or out of line. Just come on down and talk to us.
Mr. Vinciano, if you'd like to schedule a meeting with me, I'd love to talk to you.
Mike, come on. I mean,
Really?
you called, I sent you an email, you responded to my wife, and I was very pleased with it. We had a very good conversation.
And we can again.
If you would just come down here, you would have a room full of people that would leave with as much positivity as I
I'm gonna
had
go
at
home.
that meeting.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna go home to my family. The meeting's over. This is the process. And if you want to reach out to me, you know I will respond to you.
Yes, you would win a lot more hearts and minds if you would respond to us now.